Three tiers of government share 462.359 billion naira as revenue for the month of May.
Organized labor and civil society organizations denounce those calling for Nigeria's disintegration.
Stop health management organizations from disbursing national health insurance funds. Stakeholders urge the National Assembly.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the Debt Management Office and the Nigerian economy.
What do you know about your domestic and personal staff? We shall seek answers on Good Morning Nigeria. There is no nation that does not borrow to fund its developmental needs and projects, particularly as it relates to critical infrastructure. And that is why all eyes are on the budget every year to see how much is earmarked for capital projects.
Now, the federal government 2017 budget of 7.44 trillion naira recently signed into law by the acting president is no exception, especially with a deficit of 2.35 trillion naira. This means that closing the funding gap is critical to the implementation of the budget, which, of course, can be achieved through borrowing.
And according to the Debt Management Office, DMO, Nigeria's total debt stock increased to 19.15 trillion naira at the end of first quarter of 2017 from the 17.36 trillion naira at the end of last year. The external component of the country's debt stood at $13.80 billion at the end of March 2017 as against $11.40 billion in December 2016.
Now, while the special provisions have been made in the 2017 budget to borrow and then service existing debts, the Debt Management Office no doubt has its plate full as it is tasked with the challenge of advising the government on precisely what to do.
Yes, and with this huge task, the DMO has come up with various borrowing plans, which include the Eurobond, Diaspora Bond, FGN Savings Bond, and of late, the 100 billion naira Sukuk bond into the Nigerian capital market.
Well, Kirian, we have on the program today the outgoing Director General of the Debt Management Office, that's Dr. Abraham Owankwo, who will give us a general scope of Nigeria's debt profile, its servicing of its debt, as well as current or future borrowing plans, in addition to the products that the DMO has at the moment.
Kinsley, by the way, who do you allow into your home?
Well, Kirian, that depends, but precisely where do you ask?
Okay, well, let me rephrase the question with this, calling quotation from a story that is familiar to many. She was really nice to me. She did not owe me any salary. She even went to my village one time and gave my father some money. I have been driving her for the past 5 years. She was really a good woman, yet we kidnapped her and she died. Does that ring a bell?
Very well, Kirian, a sad one indeed. Some of our viewers may recall that this was part of the confessions of a 27-year-old gentleman, Ale Angba. It was a driver that planned the kidnap and eventual gruesome murder of his employer, one Dr. Mrs. Edith Chinedu Aleo. She was Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Grants Microfinance Bank, as well as proprietress of Chelsea Group of Schools, all based in Gwagwalada here in the Federal Capital Territory.
And that is one of the many horrific stories of the many cases of betrayal by some trusted domestic employees in Nigeria. You would recall, Kingsley, that the recently arrested notorious kidnapper Chukwudi Onwamadike, alias Evans, is reported to have said he gets information about his victims from insiders, a common story in criminal escapades.
Well, at this point, Kirian, the question you raised earlier becomes very pertinent, and that is, who do you allow into your home? And how do you screen and therefore verify the bona fide, as it were, of persons whom you employ as your domestic staff? In addition to the story we just said about the lady who was murdered in Gwagwalada, we had many years ago, what happened to a retired military officer. She was a woman living somewhere in Ogodu GRA. Of course, she was robbed, and eventually her body was dumped into the Lagos Lagoon. And in many such incidents, he also recalled the former professor whose vehicle was stolen by one of the guards of domestic help. Eventually, of course, he was killed, and then, of course, the robbers eventually were also picked up. Now, what all of these things indicate will be, what steps do you take in seeking to verify whom you seek to hire, either as your driver, security guard, or as your steward, or nanny, or indeed your house help generally? And then, is this public or a private business affair, or is it that you go out to a next door neighbor and say, look, Kirian, my brother, do you have somebody who can help me? Or I go to some other person and I said, you don't have any person who can help me, without actually doing serious background checks?
Yes, as a matter of fact, these are valid, questions, Kingsley, and as many cannot do without the help of security men, cooks, nannies, drivers, cleaners, and other domestic assistants. But let's just say upfront that this discourse does not aim in any way to demonize the great labor of these categories of people. Some of them at various times have also been subjected to severe maltreatment by their employers. So this is the outlook of our program today. I am Kirian Umayo, welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria, coming to you as always on the Africa's largest TV network, the NTA.
And I'm Kingsley Osadola, also welcoming you to the program, of course. Today is Friday, and it's the last for the week. In the course of the program, we shall bring you regular companion segments. These include newspaper review, business, foreign, and entertainment. Now it's time for the morning news, and we join our colleague, Olajide Bello. Hi, Jide.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to the news. The three tiers of government have distributed a sum of 462.359 billion naira as revenue accrued to the Federation accounts for the month of May. The month of May was not favorable for Nigeria's crude trade as it recorded a decline in export volume by 1.023 million barrels, coupled with the perennial problems in the Niger Delta, as well as a slight drop in the average price of crude oil from $55.38 per barrel to $55.18 per barrel. But the good news, however, is there was a significant increase in revenues from companies, income tax and royalty, with the marginal increase in customs and excise duty.
The takings by FRS increased substantially, more than made up for the reduction from NFPC receipts. Yes.
And to labor matters, members of the Organized Labor and Civil Society Organization have called on Nigerians to shun threats of pulling down the federation by desperate forces calling for disunity of the country. Pointing out the dangers in the ongoing war-mongering at a media briefing on the state of the nation, leadership of the labor movement says Nigerian workers will resist every move to threaten the sovereignty and unity of Nigeria.
We speak out because a physical conflict will haunt us all, most particularly workers, pensioners, and their families.
This call for restructuring will come over and over, just like call for the review of our constitution, the amendment of our constitution. But how we are able to manage it is what makes us a very strong nation.
In the recently concluded election in the United Kingdom, election of 2 weeks ago, 7 Nigerians emerged as legislators. Can we repeat that? Can we look at these challenges before all, and stop following those who want to divide us.
And away from labour matters now to health, a strategy towards the control of malaria disease on the continent of Africa has attained more success as a new vaccine is being experimented in some African countries. Director, Department of Immunization, Vaccine and Biologicals of the World Health Organization, Dr. Jean-Marie, made this known at an interactive session with the Senate Committee on Primary Health and Communicable Diseases.
12 or 13 of those have been introduced and are being used. Ghana and a few others are already providing us with the opportunity to demonstrate the effectiveness of some of the newer vaccines, including one of the vaccines against malaria.
The National Assembly really has been very conscious of the need to re-engineer our healthcare sector.
And still talking health, participants at the second-day investigative hearing on the activities of health management organizations by the House of Representatives Committee on Healthcare Services have called for the scrapping of health management organizations in the disbursement of National Health Insurance Scheme funds. They also recommended that the scheme be made compulsory while enrollees be allowed to choose their healthcare providers.
The NHIS must consider sending funds directly to the facilities.
The capitation and tariffs that were already undervalued, it has remained unchanged despite of the recession with the attendant increase in the market prices of drugs and consumables.
I have the facts. I know what I gave each HMO in each hospital, in each places. It's there. I will present it to the committee for them to make an informed decision. What I see, ladies and gentlemen, is a system that I've said it before, it's been run without a soul.
I want to submit that the figure that was mentioned yesterday by the Executive Secretary of NHIS was never correct, and I needed this to be quoted on the media.
We will not end the public hearing and close our books and shut our doors here. No, we will go further than that. The scheme has given us records. For information, Honorable Dixon, we have records of the payments that have been made to HMOs in the last 8 years.
And away from health, the United Nations systems providing intervention in conflict areas in the Northeast is to collaborate with the federal government to develop a national peace architecture to facilitate conflict resolution. This was the outcome of a meeting between the Minister of Interior and the UN representatives in Abuja.
How we can work with your ministry to develop a national peace architecture that can look at early warning, issues of mediation, negotiation, and conflict resolution.
We must look at the root causes, as you mentioned, of the crisis, and we must address them, particularly when we know that they are mostly women and children, so they need that protection.
The Sultan of Sokoto and President General Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Muhammad Sa'ad Abubakar III, has requested Muslims to look out for the new moon of Shawwal on Saturday, 24th June, which is the 29th of Ramadan, 1438 AH. A statement signed by Chairman Advisory Committee on Religious Affairs, Professor Sambo Wali Jr. says, when cited, it should be reported to the following numbers: 080-371 57100, 0706 741 6900, 080 66 30 3077, 080 65 48 0405, 080 359 65322, and 080 361 49757. And meanwhile, the federal government has declared Monday 26th and Tuesday 27th June public holidays to mark Eid al-Fitr. In a statement from the Ministry of Interior, Nigerians were urged to shun hate speeches and divisive tendencies and advised to join hands with the government of President Muhammadu Buhari to build a peaceful, strong and united Nigeria. Minister of Interior Abdulrahman Dambazao also reaffirms the determination of the administration to protect all lives and property of Nigerians. And that's the news for now. Korean and Kingsley will be back after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
A hectic lifestyle or overeating can cause a burning pain in your chest. That's heartburn. Take Gaviscon. 1 dose relieves in 3 minutes to soothe the pain of heartburn. It goes straight to the source to work for hours, providing long-lasting relief.
That's why I recommend Gaviscon.
I recommend Gaviscon. Gaviscon, fast relief you can actually feel.
If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
The FIFA Confederations Cup Russia 2017 on Kwese Free Sports for the fan.
Now to business news. Economic Commission for Africa and the African Development Bank restate commitment to promoting development on the continent. Plus, farmers appeal for access to processing plants to help add value to their produce. Details on business news with Joy Uzo.
And welcome to Business News. Encomiums have continued to trail government's efforts at ensuring that Nigerian farmers have easy access to loans and grants through the Central Bank, Bank of Agriculture and other financial institutions. They therefore appealed for the farmers to be assisted with processing plans to enable them add market value to their produce. President, Ginger Growers and Marketers Association of Nigeria, Mrs. Florence Edwards, in an interview with NTA Business News in Abuja, says that will further encourage farmers to do more.
Help them to add value to whatever they are producing. Not for us to produce and China to process and then bring back to Nigeria and then we now buy. Let Nigeria help farmers to process and add value to whatever we're producing. We're producing enough. We're the best. We have the spiciest ginger in Nigeria, in the whole world.
Mrs. Edwards says federal government's diversification policy is on and will solve both social and economic challenges that have been yearning for attention for years. Equities market closed Thursday on a negative note, marking a 2-day decline as the NSE All-Share Index depreciated by 1.64% to close at 32,928.44 basis points. Now a quick check at the graphic summary of closing figures on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And finally, on business news, the Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, and the Africa Development Bank, AFDB, have restated their resolve to continue to work together in advancing Africa's development agenda through the strengthening of the African Union Commission, ECA, AFDB Joint Secretariat Support Office, JSSO. Acting Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, Abdallah Amdok, this week met with the newly appointed Senior Vice President of the African Development Bank, AFDB, Charles Bohoma, to further discuss on ongoing and new major areas of cooperation between the two institutions. High on the agenda was the bank's vision, that is its I-5 agenda strategy, which is Light Up, Empower Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. They endorsed it as an effective way for the continent to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and Africa's 50-year developmental plan, Agenda 2063. The two also discussed initiatives the ECA and AFDB are already jointly working on together. Among these are Climate for Development in Africa program, the Land Policy Initiative, the fight to curb illicit financial flows from Africa, as well as the recently launched high-level panel on migration and the African economic outlook. They also pledged to continue to put their respective comparative advantages at the service of the continent and emphasize the need to continue to speak with one voice over issues relating to the development trajectory of the continent. And that's it on Business News. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Altoyabi, is in the studio. As always, Bayo, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, as always, Kirian. Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, a pleasure to have you join us today. Let's take a look at the front pages of the papers. Begin with the Daily Sun. The Daily Sun has as its lead story, weak governance, cause of agitations. And this attributed to APC governors. Details of the story can be found on page 6. Weak governance, cause of agitations, APC governors. Now, below the photograph on the front page there, you have a number of headlines. How NAS stands for the National Assembly, padded Ministry of Works budget. And this is according to Fashola, who is Minister of Power Works and Housing. Details of the story again on page 6. And on page 9, in greater detail, EU deports 34 Nigerians for violating immigration laws. And on page 38, court restrains El Rufai from sacking 4,000 traditional rulers. And right there at the foot of the front page of the Daily Sun, there's a strip headline there. CAN, that's Christian Associations of Nigeria, rejects federal government explanation on CRK and IRK merger. Of course, CRK stands for Christian Religious Knowledge and then Islamic Religious Studies as well.
All right, leadership newspaper for this Friday. And just below the nameplate, we have a demolition, promotion, allegation, rocks Ministry of Health. The story is on page 7 of leadership. And just towards the right, we have a federal government, states, local governments share 462.4 billion naira for June. Details will be is on page 8 of the newspaper. That just below, recall, INEC notifies Senator Melaye and begins verification. And just below that too, you see Dino replying, I am yet to receive notice. This man has been on the news for a while now. Bayo, you'll get to that when we'll conclude this. Now, the main headline on leadership, no plan to take over Etisalat. Consortium in seats, demands full repayment. Story is on page 5. The writer, NCC to meet banks, warns against illegal takeover. All right, below the photograph, Eid al-Fitr, Sultan urges Muslims to look for new moon on Saturday. The story is on page 4. Bayo.
Yes, thank you, Kiri. Let's start with the APC Governors Forum. They have blamed the agitations around the country on elements they describe as weak governance. They also proscribe solutions, and they say the solution lies in national consultation and negotiations. Meanwhile, the organized labor has also lended its voice, and they have charged all Nigerians to stand up with one voice and challenge those promoting division and on the basis of primordial sentiments. Labour argues that those doing it are doing it for their vested interest and not representing the interest of any community. Labour says that some influential Nigerians were funding hate campaigns and agitations by ethnic groups to threaten unity of the country. Labour cautions that it is own members that will suffer the consequences. Therefore, it will not keep quiet and it will rise up to the challenge. That advice should be strongly noted. What has happened is that the vociferous minority has taken over and the silent majority are looking. And that is why it is appearing as if those agitations, those hate speech, those separatists, vandals who have taken us to ransom, and insurgents are appearing to be on the majority. So time is that. They must be put back to the order. The majority of the people want to live in peace. Talking about the story about recall, the INEC has written to Senator Dino Melaye to notify him that the recall process has begun. In fact, INEC says it has set a date, 3rd July, for which the senator and the constituent are to meet to verify the signatures. However, leadership reports that Senator Melaye says he has not received any communication from INEC. He has earlier on described the recall process as a hoax. He says that he is unfazed by all the moves because the exercise cannot succeed. Meanwhile, the Constitution in Section 69 provides for the processes of recall, and the INEC Act provides 10 steps that are to be taken in carrying out that process.
Well, it's not been easy. We've had this recall issue in the past. It has not been conclusive. It's not been successful. So I wonder why this, and how would you think, in consideration, how is this going to be possible?
It is a tedious process, and the process of recall simply underlies the fact that power belongs to the people. Anybody who is in power is representing his people, and if these people feel that the representation is not adequate enough, or they are not satisfied with it, they have the prerogative to recall. That is the option available for them. For those in the executive, the other alternative, of course, is impeachment. So
well, we have discussed this subject on Good Morning Nigeria, and indeed we had a guest who was the target of a recall in the period between 2003 and 2007. He was a guest here. We also had the INEC director of voter education. Yes. But the process is tedious. Yes. But if the constituents feel that that's the way to go, of course, they will embark on that course. Whether or not they will succeed is a different matter. But the key thing is for the target of the recall himself not to take things for granted, because if the process is concluded, you probably wouldn't become the first person to have been successful in the recall.
But the important thing is that it emphasizes the democratic process as power belonging to the people. Ultimately, they can determine that. The other story of high interest is in the area of agriculture, and it points towards diversification of the economy with emphasis on agriculture. There are two positive reports. A Punch reports that Osun State cocoa processing industry now processes about 20,000 tons of cocoa. Before now, the process, which started in October 1982, went moribund by 2001. However, with a golden monkey organization like China working in collaboration, they've now succeeded in reviving that process, and now cocoa is to be processed into cocoa liquor for export. Later on, they are hoping to develop into cocoa powder as well as cocoa cakes for export. In another development, a total of 72 metric tons of Nigeria yams are to be exported to United Kingdom and USA next week. The Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Chief Audu Ogbe, says that this will make the commencement through the Apapa port, and 72 metric tons are to be exported, and in containers, 3 containers. One will be leaving for United Kingdom, and 2 containers will be leaving for United States.
Yeah, we just hope that proper checks have been done. Because remember that in the past there are some of Nigeria goods that were turned back because it didn't pass through, for instance, quarantine and other detailed checks that should be done to avoid being rejected. When
the issue had more to do with beans. They said because some of the beans had been treated with pesticides or some other preservatives that were not shouldn't have been used. I just hope that as we are exporting yams, that the price of local yams will not rise.
Okay.
All right, let's take a look at the Nigerian pilot, front page of the Nigerian pilot, below the nameplate. Nigeria's population to overtake U.S. by 2050. That's according to the UN. Nigeria's population to overtake U.S. by 2050. According to the UN, details of that story on page 2. And Measles campaign, federal government seeks 3 billion naira from Gavi. That's on page 5. Now, $1.6 billion fraud, that's the kicker. EFCC to tender evidence against oil magnate. That's on page 5. And Bayo already discussed this. The story is there. Quit notice. That's the kicker. We are for one Nigeria. NLC and 2UC declared. Below that, you have a number of other headlines. Benue embarks on table payment for workers' salaries. And Akeredolu signs 2017 budget. Nigeria has highest number of unimmunized children worldwide. That's it's an attribution, but the name is not there on the front page, but go to page 6 for greater details. And Dangote donates millions of naira worth of food items to FCT underprivileged. And human trafficking, Nigeria and Benin Republic review success and seek closer ties.
All right, on Daily Trust this morning, below the nameplate, we have Salah. Of course, we read that in other headlines. Sultan urges Muslims to look for new moon on Saturday. Details on page 12. And of course, close to that is federal government says local government share 462.3 billion revenue for May. We also read that in other headlines. Now, it's on page 3 of Daily Trust. Now, the main headline, Taraba. Militiamen withdraw as troops take over villages. The writer, Oshimajo, summoned service chiefs, governors, casualty figures exaggerated, and pastorists want state of emergency. Over 50 killed, Senator says. That is on page maybe 28 of the Daily Trust. And below that, you'll see a very interesting photograph there where Muslims, in Bangladesh, some are riding on top of a train to get to their villages for celebration of Salah. That's interesting. And below that, we have pregnant woman, 2 sons killed in just building collapse. That's on page 4. And then INEC notifies Senator Melaye on recall petition on page 3, and court restrains El-Rufai from sacking district and village health, also on page 4 of Daily Trust.
Yes. All right, Bayo, very quickly.
Yes, the report you said about the United Nations World Population Report says Nigeria will be the 3rd most populated nation in the world by the year 2050. However, that report had actually indicated that Nigeria, that is 7th now, will come after China, India, Indonesia before Nigeria. Nigeria has overtaken Pakistan and USA. If that report is to be taken seriously, it means Nigeria will be 4th, not 3rd, as it's been reported. And finally, there have been some anxieties in South Africa about a ship delivering a human being. This speculation was on in the Eastern Cape, and the chief director of veterinary medicine has clarified. He said it is not a human sperm that has incubated a sheep ovum. Rather, it is a virus infection that has led to the deformation of the lamb. So what they have there is a deformed lamb, not a human being.
All right, Bayo Atuebe, we'd like to thank you for being with us this week. While we are looking at Nigeria's population growing, we should also be worried about unemployment and how we can grow the economy to take care of the current population size.
There's no birth control.
That's, I mean, that's the way said that.
As many as you can have.
There was a policy of, one family, 4 children, and we have left that. That's why we're having all these social problems that continue to compound our national circumstance. So there's no point bragging about the size of our population when we can't take care of the population. Bayo Atuebe, thank you for being here today and indeed for the week. We hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Public holiday Monday, Tuesday.
That's right, but Good Morning Nigeria, of course, will be on. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now.
The Future Assured project of the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammad Buhari, is carrying out free medical screening and distribution of food items at various IDP camps, while ensuring the economic empowerment of women through training and skill acquisition. In recognition of her efforts, wives of governors have lent their voices and support.
In Kogi State, we feel the impact of Future Assured, especially in women and children. The Future Assured program of Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, the wife of the President, has been very assuring and still reassuring in Sokoto State. It has impacted positively in the areas of humanity, especially women and children.
Supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
Cadbury Bournvita now comes in an attractive new 500-gram refill pack. Simply open and reseal after use to retain the chocolatey and creamy taste. Cadbury Bournvita, prepare to win.
All right, joining us now to discuss this issue is a man who's been here on several occasions on this matter. I'd like Kingsley to give me a proper introduction.
No, we're Kirian. I mean, we're both on side. We have this morning, of course, a fairly familiar face, to the members of the public, as well as on Good Morning Nigeria. Has been here a couple of times in recent times as well. He's the Director General of the Debt Management Office, Dr. Abraham Nwankwo. Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, a pleasure to have you join us on the program today again. We said that the Debt Management Office obviously has been engaged in pushing out a number of products. The last time we had you here, you were discussing the FGN Savings Bond, what the reactions had been in terms of levels of subscription, and you had at some point also indicated that we're going to have a diaspora bond. Of course, that's what's been on. And then you have another product that is also out there. All of this, of course, against the background of the signing of the appropriation bill into law now, namely how to finance the budget deficit and the various means that have come up. Let's have an overview precisely now of the exposure, as it were, of the Debt Management Office through a number of debt instruments.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria. As you have rightly said, we borrow for the country to fund the gap in the budget. And that means that it's important to appreciate that Nigeria's debt profile reflects what Nigeria has systematically decided to borrow from year to year. And we borrow only what is appropriated in the budget, which means unnecessary precautions, unnecessary analysis would have been done not only by the executive arm of government, but also by the National Assembly that appropriates the budget, including, of course, the borrowing component of it. Having said that, the Debt Management Office owes it to Nigerians to make sure that they design appropriate instruments, appropriate products for the purpose of raising these monies that have been approved at various levels, and also making sure that in the process we develop the Nigerian financial system, because the level of development of a country's financial system is critical to its sustained growth and development. So it is in that context that, apart from the introduction of the Eurobond, which we did first in 2011, repeated in 2013, and then in February of this year, we went to the international capital market to borrow part of the external component for funding the budget. We have also, just a few days ago, based on the mandate that was given to us, we had gone for the first time to issue a diaspora bond, which is a bond enabling Nigerians outside the country to participate in providing funds for the growth and development of the economy. In this case, it's important to note that Nigeria is the first country that has been allowed, that the first country in Africa that has been allowed by the United States economy under the rules of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission to issue a retail bond in the United States market. The United States market is very restrictive. It tries as much as possible to protect the ordinary investor in the United States. It can allow you to talk directly to the big investors, the institutional investors, but it doesn't allow you to talk directly to the retail end. So for you to be given an approval to issue a diaspora bond, which is a retail product in the U.S. market, means that you have gone through stringent evaluation. And it means that it has been confirmed that the Nigerian economy, the Nigerian system is such that there's a high level of transparency and accountability, and there's a reliability, there's a serious level of reliability in terms of being certain that these retail investors, their debts will be serviced and their debts will be repaid as and when due. So that is a plus. The fact that Nigeria is the first African country to be able to issue a retail product in the U.S. market. Again, that product, as I said, was designed to make sure that Nigerians in diaspora participate. And that is in line with the philosophy of this administration of making sure we have an inclusive economic process. As we recover and as we grow, it should be inclusive. It is in that regard, too, that we have concluded arrangements for the issuing of the Sukuk, which is a non-interest bearing bond. As you know, there are members of the society who do not want to earn interest based on moral or religious or ethical grounds. And it is important to structure an instrument that enables them to earn a return, but not in the form of interest. And that's why we're introducing the Sukuk. We have concluded arrangements for that. Indeed, it was supposed to be issued maybe sometime next week. However, because of the celebrations around the Salah celebrations, we thought it's good to postpone it a little so that all Nigerians who are in the mood of festivity, who are gone on holidays, who, whether internally or externally, would have been around. But the important thing is that Nigeria is poised in the next couple of weeks to issue the Sukuk, which is an instrument appealing to those who don't want to earn interest in the money to provide to government, but who want to earn returns from the investments that will be made. Again, this points to the idea of financial inclusion, making sure that all segments of the society have an opportunity to participate, to contribute to development, and also to share in the benefits that come from such participation.
All right, sir. Really, you have read out a lot of products that has been envisaged to assist in implementing the nation's budget. Now, you talked about to design appropriate instrument, and again, you said to develop Nigeria's financial system. I'd like you to come on these two issues so Nigerians will understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing.
Now, for every economy, one of the indices of development is how much of the population participates in the formal sector. And the participation in the formal sector is usually indicated by financial inclusion. That is, how many people understand the products in the economy, how to invest, what are the investment opportunities in the economy. Do they have access to those investment opportunities so they can take the decision? Not everybody would like to invest, but it's good for everybody to know and then make their decision. So there should be that choice. So first of all is that there should be a variety of instruments, because variety of instruments means that people have a wider choice. Two, there should be access, which means people should be well informed, well educated, and given the opportunity to participate. So, and these are components of economic development, because in every economy, at every point in time, there are people who are in deficit. Individuals, households, companies who are in deficit. That is, they need money to be able to carry out their own activities. But at the same time, there are people who are surplus, called surplus units, who have surplus at that point in time, and they want to be able to provide to other people who need it and make some return from it. So it is important, therefore, that you develop a variety of instruments, and that you also educate the population, and you give the population the opportunity so that if they, at any point in time, if they belong to the surplus unit, they will know that they have at less for the surplus. And those who are in deficit know that there is a source to fund them for their deficit. In this way, the economy moves forward.
All right, Dr. Nwankwo, what is the value of the diaspora bonds subscribed to by the retail subscribers in the U.S. market?
Yeah, the bond we issued was for $300 million US dollars, which was what was approved by the National Assembly, and we raised that total amount. The subscription was about 130%, which means it was oversubscribed, and we raised it at an interest rate of 5.625%, which is quite.
What's the maturity?
The maturity is the maturity is 5 years.
5 years.
It will mature in 5
and then for
years.
the Sukuk, Kyrian, because the DG was talking about Sukuk, that non-interest bearing for persons who either on religious, moral, or ethical grounds do not want interest, but want some return. So what is our return?
That return is in form of, if you like, is in form of profit sharing, is in form of dividend. It's just like the simple way to look at it, so that all of us can understand it, is that if you lend money to somebody, he pays you interest, you take the risk, you must pay the interest, and but you make all the profit, whether it's big or small. But when you don't want to earn interest and you want to share in it, you agree on a minimum return, which will come from the productivity of what you invest in.
Is that like a debenture?
Yes.
So it's more like an equity, a short-term equity.
I wanted to make something clearer, with respect to this Sukuk we were talking about. They don't demand interest. Now, if Nigeria goes for such bond or loan, as the case may be, do we have investments that we could make that is commercially oriented that could enable us now make the gains or profit, as the case may be, that they will get benefit from? That's number one. Number two, sir, is you said that Nigeria is the first country in Africa that has been allowed to go into this diaspora bond. Now, how successful has it been so far? What is the success story can tell us about this diaspora bond?
Okay, let me start from the last one. Yeah, it's successful to the extent that what the people of Nigeria mandated us to raise is $300 million US dollars, and we have raised that $300 million US dollars. So it was fully successful. And as I said, the subscription was 130%, which means it was oversubscribed. But of course, we took only what we had been mandated to take by the people and government of Nigeria, which is $300 million US dollars. So it was successful. And of course, in terms of subscription, we did roadshows in Europe, the specific cities in London, in Geneva, and in Zurich. And in the United States, we did roadshows in New York as well as in Miami. Now, these cities were chosen based on the fact that this is where you talk to the private banks and wealth managers, who are the people allowed by their laws to intermediate with these retail people we are talking about, the diaspora in this case. Okay. So we had to go to the cities where these private banks and wealth managers who are licensed in their own jurisdictions to link with retail people, because in U.S., as I was saying, it's not everybody that can deal with the retail people. They have a very restrictive structure. So that is one. Then on the issue of what to use the money for, would that be? Yes, for the Sukuk, projects have been chosen that will be, that allow for cost recovery. For example, Tolebu roads. Those are the type of things you can use the money raised from Sukuk for. Roads that can be tolled. So in that case, the project is generating revenue to service the debt. So
well, let's say still on that, Dr. Nwankwo, considering the wide range of products that have been rolled out by your office on behalf of the federal government, you talked about the Eurobond, FGN savings bond, and of course the regular treasury bills that are issued from time to time. Now the Sukuk is coming on. Do we have a sense of what this might mean in terms of trying to drive development, trying to drive infrastructure, and therefore what we will do in recovering the cost and then being able to pay back? Are we accumulating debts all over again?
Now, let me start by answering that. All these range of products are not necessarily, do not necessarily mean you are raising more money. That each time you introduce a new product, it means you are raising more money than you decided to raise. Okay. Already, the amount to be raised each year in form of borrowing is well specified in the budget. So what we do is to use a combination of products, a combination of bonds, a combination of instruments to raise the same amount of money. So we are not increasing the amount to be borrowed, but we are diversifying the various instruments you could use to do the borrowing. And the essence of the diversification, first of all, is to make sure that you achieve financial inclusiveness, as I mentioned already, which means you want all segments of the Nigerian society to have an opportunity. The FGN savings bond was introduced so that ordinary people, artisans, drivers, truck pushers, market women can also use their 5,000 or their 10,000 naira to buy a government bond and earn interest on it. Meanwhile, the bond they have received is being traded on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which means they are now part of the modern financial system. So that's financial inclusiveness. You also want to do that, just as I've said, because you want to encourage people to develop the culture of saving and investment, which means people know that, okay, if I have surplus, I should lend it to another unit, economic unit or economic agent that's in deficit, and I earn something, and vice versa. So you are achieving that. Now, in terms of development, the whole idea is that, first of all, you are developing the financial system because you are improving flexibility. There are many options for you, for the country, and of course, for every product we develop, we are expecting a private sector component, counterpart of it. So what it means is that for the whole economy, you are introducing flexibility that not just the public sector, but also the private sector, has a choice, has flexibility in what are the various sources of funds. So at a particular point in time, whether government or private sector, we see what is the combination of Eurobond, of diaspora bond, of a savings bond, of various bonds that will satisfy its needs. So introduce a choice. Now, over time, medium to long term, the whole idea is that you are creating an environment that encourages savings and investment. And that's the secret to economic development. So you can mobilize money for capital projects to fix infrastructure, roads, power sectors. Yes, we have serious infrastructure deficits now, but even when we cover it by God's will in the next 3 to 5 years, we will cover it. As the economy grows, you continue needing more money to retool the system, to modernize the sector.
The issue is we are borrowing now, because that's what the bonds amount to, and so on and so forth. And anybody who was in this country in the 80s up to the 90s, in fact, up only a few years ago, when we had a debt relief, we'll all be concerned. So, is there cause to worry?
Now, let me put it this way. First of all, is to appreciate that every country, no matter how great, no matter how well managed, borrows. And the simple way to look at it is that, does Germany borrow? Go and look at the country's balance sheet. You see that Germany is more borrowed than Nigeria. US, China, even China borrows. Go and look at the China's balance sheet. You see that they borrow. India borrows. UK borrows. France borrows. These are very strong economies. So so let's not go into this. So it's the principle of all life that every money economy borrows. Yes, that's number one. Secondly, is that yes, Nigeria had unsustainable debt in the past and was able to solve that problem. Okay, so that does not mean that it cannot borrow just since it is a normal economy, other normal economies borrow. However, the emphasis is on making sure that the debt is sustainable. And that is why the focus is on using the borrowing to fund infrastructure so that the economy will boom. So that in the future, government will depend more on revenue.
Dr. Nwankwo, you've spoken so well, about this, from a professional point of view. But we all know that poor management has always been the bane of national development. So now let's go to the another question now. Now, the DMO initiated a national roundtable on inflation. Now, why the focus on inflation?
I don't think it's the DMO. I think the issue of a roundtable on inflation is a little personal. I don't know whether it's the place to say it. It's not the DMO. It's, thanks to the people and government of Nigeria, my humble self have been asked to lead the debt management office for the past 10 years. And my 10-year tenure is ending in the next couple of days. And my professional colleagues, as a word of, if you like, call it send-off, decided that to mark the exit is instead of an ordinary party drinking and eating, let's have a national roundtable on inflation, appreciating that somehow I do a lot of work on inflation as an economist, as a person. I do a lot of work on inflation, and indeed, I've just published a book which will be presented on 29th, and the book is on inflation.
29th of which month?
Of this month, which is Thursday next week in Abuja here at the Ladikwali Hall, Sheraton Hotel. So it's my professional colleagues that are arranging that to mark my exit as the Director General of the Debt Management Office after 10 years, thanks to the mandate given to me by the government and people of Nigeria. So it's not really a DMO affair. It's an affair organized by my professional friends to mark my exit.
But it has to blaze out. We talk about the national economy.
That's right. And for 10 years, I mean, significantly, at the time you came into office, that's when Nigeria just exited the debt trap that it had been in for a couple of decades. What has been your experience over the past 10 years, particularly managing the national as well as sub-national debts? What is the structure and what are the prospects?
As you know, the DMO was established in the year 2000 and started on a very strong note. The first two chief executive director generals, Mr. Akin Arikawe and then Dr. Mansumuta, laid a very good foundation for the debt management office. I mean, of course, it was due to their work in collaboration with the then Minister of Finance, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, that Nigeria, at that time, we were relatively lower staff, and Nigeria was able to obtain the debt relief. But the most important thing is that these pioneer director generals I have mentioned laid a very strong foundation for the debt management office in terms of professionalism, in terms of commitment to duty, to make sure that people do their best for the country while working in that office. And in terms of having that, trying to focus on world-class standards. So based on their foundation, over these 10 years, DMO has continued, as we have been discussing here, to make sure that we contribute to the growth and development of the economy. And that is why, for example, in terms of product development, we try to make sure that the Nigerian system is financially sophisticated by introducing new products while we are raising money for government, while at the same time encouraging the private sector to have access to the market. But more importantly, during this period, we have made sure we have emphasized the establishment of technical tools that make sure that Nigeria's debt is sustainable. For example, every year, we conduct the debt sustainability analysis so we can advise government, advise the Nigerian people, and have informed discussion. Yes, because of the nature of the Nigerian economy, which all of us know, the fact of overdependence on oil as a source of revenue and as a source of foreign exchange, the economy needs to diversify. And therefore, the Debt Management Office, while it is borrowing what has been appropriated, continues to emphasize that debt sustainability depends on economic sustainability. And economic sustainability means that, look, let's mobilize resources to fund infrastructure, to make the economy healthy, so that government source of revenue should not be from oil, but it should be from, the taxes and levies get from agricultural exports, the taxes and levies goes from manufacturing, the taxes and levies get from solid minerals, so that the economy will be diversified. In that case, if the economy is very strong, of course, the debt will even become more sustainable than it is now. But certainly, the Nigerian debt is sustainable, but the weak area is in the area of revenue. As you know, Nigeria's tax revenue GDP ratio is very low. It's just about 6%, which means that we do, Nigerians as individuals and as companies are not paying taxes adequately. And if they do that, then we will be able to service our debt even better than we are doing now. So that is the proviso. Okay. But overall, Nigeria has a vibrant debt management structure. This is the first country that had to establish debt management offices for all the constituent units, 36 states and the FCT. So that shows you how seriously Nigeria takes debt management.
Dr. Manko, thank you very much. Considering your wealth of experience, in economic management, what direction should our economic managers focus as the nation struggles to exit a recession?
No, we already, all of us collectively are already doing that. Of course, you are conversant with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. That shows already that we Nigerians, as a people, the government and the people, have a clear vision of where we want to move from where we are now. So the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is emphasizing governance, good governance, which means things must be done transparently, accountably, there should be probity, there should be less corruption, there should be less leakage. It's emphasizing macroeconomic stability, which means we should have appropriate interest rate, appropriate exchange rate, appropriate rates of inflation. But those ones are to be achieved through the third pillar, which is we have to build a strong economy, and that strong economy has to be based on the fact that, look, it has to be competitive. And for an economy to be competitive, we have to have adequate infrastructure, rules, power, and other. That's why government is encouraging itself, as well as the private sector, to mobilize adequate resources so that we can rapidly deal with the problem of infrastructure, so that cost of production will be lower, so that instead of importing goods, we produce goods here and we save foreign exchange by not importing more than we need to import, so that we can export and earn foreign exchange.
All right, Dr. Wankwa, you've spoken about the nation's debt structure, how debt sustainability is linked to economic sustainability. Some commentators have sometimes expressed concern about the utility of debts being accumulated at the subnational level. Do you have any concerns about this, and therefore what the managers of the nation's economy ought themselves to do, so that the economy doesn't collapse, say, at the seams?
Now, let all of us appreciate that whether at the federal or subnational level, that's the state level, Nigeria is institutionally stronger today than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. As I said, one of the priorities that the government adopted 10 years ago was to say, look, we need to have debt management capabilities institutions at the state level. And that's why working with the DMO, all states have their own debt management department. What it means is that, look, we may not have reached the apex. However, we have laid the foundation for solid institutions, and that's important in solid institution building. So there's focus on solid institution building both at the federal and state levels, and that's the right way to go. So we're on the right track.
All right, Dr. Abraham Owankwo, outgoing Director General of the Debt Management Office. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. I'm sure the next time we'll have you, you will not be DG DMO.
No.
Thanks a lot for being here today. We hope you enjoy your weekend, and we hope you enjoy the rest of what you intend to do.
Very grateful to Nigerians.
All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. Not be only to connect lights.
Come you and yourself now.
Now wow. Oh boy, calm down now. Oga Kasali electrician, who would they look for with this? Oh, Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from over.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 Naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now to the second leg of our conversation this morning. The need for domestic hands and other aids has become more increasing as many urban professionals make progress in their careers, thereby having less time to devote to domestic needs. But stories of horrific betrayals by some domestic employees continue to make many skeptical on engaging domestic aids to alleviate their sufferings. The question now is, who do you allow into your home? Ahmed Mbali gives us a teaser for our discussion, but we'll likely warn you that some portions of this report could be found disturbing. So viewer discretion is therefore advised.
2 years ago, this video from Kenya shocked the world. For parents who rely on house helps to tend to their wards, a nightmare of unimaginable proportion. Video surveillance helped to bring this dangerous maid to book, but for many without such a revealing tool, both child and parents are at the mercy of their house helps. Incidents like this rekindled the age-long debate over hiring domestic helps. Turn between the devil and the deep blue sea, it's a touchy issue for many working tight schedules and needing the extra hand, either as nannies, drivers, security guards, gardeners, cooks, or even office employees. At the end, it becomes a case of necessary evil for many. But it's not as much about the pros and cons, but of how much those who engage the services of domestic hands really know those they invite into their homes. Many rely on references from friends and colleagues to secure the services of their domestic staff, and very few formal agencies exist to recruit those hands they require. Medical or other records are usually not available to give an indication of who is being brought into the household. Even where employers take the trouble to ask, there is usually no way to verify the information. And the consequences of this are sometimes dire, as is the case of an Abuja socialite who was raped and buried in a shallow grave by her driver. Overall, the advice of security experts is that employers of domestic helps should go the extra mile by carrying out background and security checks on those they engage. Where possible, they advise medical tests be carried out to ascertain the health status of the domestic staff. Closed-circuit security cameras could go a long way in providing an insight into what goes on when the employer is not around. As is the case of the Kenyan maid, no one could have known the extent of her atrocities if an extra eye had not been kept on her. In the light of the above, should mistrust, doubt and suspicion become the character of the relationship between domestic assistants and their employers? What could motivate someone who has earned the confidence of his employer turn his back in a brazen way that leaves tears, scars and sorrow? These are the issues guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be addressing.
All right, Ambali, thank you very much for that report. Of course, my colleague Kirian had earlier advised that some portions of that report will be found disturbing by some of our viewers. There are many disturbing scenes and stories that we get to hear. We have guests with us in the studios, as well as from Jos Network Center to discuss this. First, we'd like to welcome a professor of police studies, is Professor Olu Ogunsakin. He is a technical advisor to the Inspector General of Police. Professor Ogunsakin, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Okay.
And okay, go ahead.
All right. We also have with us here in the Abuja studios Pastor Boma Pepple. Pastor Boma Pepple is, among other things, an expert on domestic staff issues. Pastor Pepple, I'd like to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. And also joining us from our Jos studio is Dr. Chundung Pamshar. Dr. Chundung is a sociologist. Dr. Chundung, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's begin the conversation with Professor Ogunsakin. Professor Ogunsakin, you listened to the background report, and of course we are familiar, I would assume, with all kinds of stories about what happens between domestic staff and their employers, whether private or personal staff. You know, it could be a personal assistant, it could be a driver, it could be a steward or otherwise. What exactly is the state of things in terms of the reportage of misbehavior by personal staff in a domestic scene?
Thank you for inviting me. The issue we face in most cases is not just limited to the reporting that we get. It's actually more extensive than that, because majority of what happens doesn't really get to the public hearing. The challenge we have with domestic staff, including the drivers, and even sometimes it goes as well as the house tutors that people invite to their homes to assist them, is the fact that there is not enough check to actually ascertain who these people are. And in most cases, they actually know about the the boss, the people that owns the home, than the people that actually employ them. So there are 3 stages that we've come up with to actually make sure that we can assess the credibility and integrity of the people we're inviting to our homes. And these 3 is, I call them the pre-engagement check. And the second one is the ongoing engagement check. And the third one is the post-engagement check. And these 3 areas are critical for the survival of the household. The fact that the first one is not well done, most people rush into engaging house help without actually looking into their credibility, to their background. In most cases, people go as far as employing them overnight without thinking ahead of time. And there is not enough police check being done. The guarantors are not actually looked into. A lot of people don't know where their house help lives. They don't know their qualification. And we call it the integrity test. A lot of people are not aware how honest and truthful are the people they're employing. And secondly, when you look at the issue of ongoing check, which is quite important, people, just because they're already in your homes doesn't make you feel comfortable. You need to be able to ascertain that this person is the person you employ. The issue of social media is critical here. A lot of those people will have access to the WhatsApp and Facebook, and then the kind of friends they keep. And I think the most important one that most people actually neglect is the fact that the one we call the post-engagement. After they finish their work with you, where do they go? Do you have access to them? And these are the areas where we need to concentrate on as Nigerians. And the way we treat the house help as well is important, because in as much as when they come in, they are innocent, majority of them. And as you rightly said in your introduction, we are not here to demonize them. A lot of them are doing excellent job. But at the end of the day, we need to be very careful how we treat them, because in the process, we actually demonize some of them and they turn against us.
Yeah.
And these are the issues that we need to face.
All right, thank you very much. In recent years, the issue of hiring domestic hands have become a business kind of. Some people are actually paid to look for somebody to hire for some families. So when you talk about background checking, it's rarely there. Right, and that brings us to the question of what should be, the concern of those hiring domestic staff. And I'm coming to Mr. Pepple this time around. Now, what should be the concern of those hiring domestic staff, and how do they go? How should they go about handling such concerns?
Well, thank you. Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you for this opportunity. Basically, the issue of hiring domestic staff is a concern for every Nigerian, because when it happens, the trauma is all-encompassing. It reaches down to everybody. I'm happy that we're here talking about this. The issues of background check and knowing where the details of their family and all that is key. But the point is, how do we go about that? Clearly, I think that there are three components we should look at. First of all, the domestic staff, regardless of the work he's doing, there are three levels. One is the non-criminal minded one. The next level is the one that is non-criminal minded but surrounded by a criminal peer group, and the one that is actually criminal minded. Now you want to take steps that will stop them from migrating from one point to the other. So what happens is, I think that the nation, the police and everyone should come together, have some form of collaboration where agencies would have a unified software application, a unified data collection point. So any person who's hiring all such staff will not have the discretion. You must register them within a particular framework. And if you do that, it means that the background, the questions of registration for every particular host will be recorded. So you have the friends, the brothers, all family members that are related to that person recorded. So if that person leaves your home and is going somewhere else, the next host in another city is mandated to register the same person. So at that point, you can track migration, you can do background check. If, for example, somebody goes to Oyo State and is being recruited by whoever, and you check, do you have a registration pin? And the person says no. And if you go online, if you have access to it, you immediately find out this person is lying. So right from the start, you know you're dealing with a liar. And then you have a clear record system. It is deterrent because the hosts and the house helps or the drivers, everybody knows that they are being recorded. So they cannot they wouldn't want to migrate to the criminal mind. Now you have to be dealing with the ones with the criminal mind. When they know that the institutions or the system is well coordinated, they will be thinking of the best ways to beat it, and it will be difficult. We have this recent case where somebody who is a driver, the one that's in the public domain now, Evans was a driver, he goes out, he comes in and prays in as a driver. If these things were recorded the way we're talking, police cannot do it alone. So I think the police will be working with the private sector operators to get these things done systematically, and it becomes, I think it should become law. You can't just hire people without really doing the background checks, because when the loss comes, when the trauma comes, it falls on every individual in the entire country, because the fear, the apprehension of this could happen to you could even make you be suspicious of the innocent ones that live with you. So I think that these are the steps we should take.
All right, Pastor Boma Peppel, thank you very much, as well as Professor Ogunshakin. You've raised a number of points. Some persons, some of our viewers probably would say, look, what you're looking at will be a more formalized employment structure, but that our economy is largely informal, and that's why we're going over now to the sociologist, Dr. Chung Dung Pamshan, who joined us, who was introduced earlier by my colleague, Kirian. Dr. Pamshan, the point that has been raised by Pastor Boma Peppel is to the effect that, look, let's get persons properly documented. And documentation, of course, is one of the steps towards greater formality. But perhaps we can then split the categories of domestic staff that we're talking about. Some of them are just house helps. You go to the village, you bring 1 or 2 persons to come and assist you. Others, you go through some semi-formal agencies. How can we begin to get up to the scale of formalizing domestic staff, personal assistance, so that some of the challenges that arise now can be overcome?
Thank you for the question. I totally agree with the other 2 discussants, but like they've said, it's not all domestic staff or domestic workers that are bad. We've had families giving testimony to individual workers that have added value to their families. They've taken care of their children. They've taken care of the house. They've been so faithful in their work. However, like they have said, if we talk of the semi-urban areas or the villages, it might be a little bit easier to some extent, because people around neighborhood, to some extent, knows individual families. And so for one to recruit a domestic worker, maybe from the rural areas or the semi-urban areas, it is mandatory that whoever is recruiting them must go an extra mile to know the family where such a servant or a worker is to be recruited. And so the issue of the guarantor is very, very important. You cannot just go ahead and ask maybe a neighbor or a friend that you need a domestic worker. And sometimes from the religious angle, you see somebody in the church, you might say, okay, this is a brother from the church. You contact such a person and he says, oh, I have a brother or a sister or an uncle who will do very well to carry out these duties you are intending to. And so they come in the name of a brother, not knowing the background of the person. So knowing the integrity of the person is very, very important. And you must have a guarantor, whether in the urban area or in the rural area. Somebody must stand in for whoever is going to be recruited. It is very important to even sign an agreement that whatever happens, you will be contacted. You will be held responsible. And that guarantor must be somebody who is reliable and elderly, somebody who is trusted, who is known, that can really attest to whoever is going to be recruited. So it is very important to have that guarantor. And if you are recruiting such a person, what kind of work do you want him or her to do? What is the age of the person you are recruiting? You must specify the job. You cannot just ask somebody who comes in, just leave everything in the hands of the person, go ahead and cook, go ahead and wash, and you go away. Anything could happen. You must specify the rules, the values, the culture of the family to whoever you are recruiting, and it must be in the presence of the guarantor. There are areas in the home that this person must not go in, like the bedroom. These are areas, this is a room where some valuables are kept. You cannot just leave everywhere open. And you must be sensitive to changes in your home. You must be alert to any change or changes that you notice, because as a woman or as a couple, we must know the locations of things. You must know whether there are issues of stealing, pilferages, and the rest. So you must be up and doing in order to make sure that these things do not happen. For the children in the home, you must be very close to your children. You must always communicate with them so that if they notice anything that is unusual, they must report to you, because you must be very sensitive. You must be communicating. These domestic workers must abide by the rules. There are times, maybe the nanny, if she has grown to a level, you can send her and maybe to go look for something for her to go and do, like a job, and then you send her in peace, and then you can get another person. But you must be sensitive in whoever you are recruiting. Like the other people have said, the background information of whoever you are recruiting is very important. And I must add that couples must be able to cooperate. Couples should be able to do most of the things themselves. And if our children are growing to some extent, they should participate in household chores. It is not very, very necessary for you to have some of them. Because these days, some of us have become so lazy, and sometimes it is like a status symbol to have domestic servants or domestic workers, feeling as if though you have arrived. But it is like a dilemma. If you have a very good domestic worker, it's like a gold. But when you have a bad domestic worker, it is like unleashing hell into your home. These people have brought about disorganization of families. Children have been tortured, like we have seen in the clip. Even the employers have been, to a large extent, been made to face a lot of challenges. Women, the women have been raped by house helps. Nannies have sort of made the man to like divorce his wife just to have her. And we've seen instances where drivers have led to instances where children have, because of recklessness in their driving. I read of a driver who asked the children he was carrying to school whether they are ready to die. And it really happened because the car crashed out of recklessness. And some of the children died. And so we must be very, very careful in whoever we are recruiting, except if it becomes very, very necessary, or else we should be able to a large extent, carry out our duties ourselves with the cooperation of the man and his wife. Thank you.
Dr. Pamsha, thank you indeed for that explanation. But I want to stay with you, because what I want to ask you now has to do with your professional know-how. Well, the concern has always been the abuse of domestic staff. But today we're talking about abuse arising from safe employers of domestic staff, or how safe employers of domestic staff are. Now, from sociological perspective, what kind of relationship should exist between the hired staff and, of course, the family?
In fact, if you are hiring a domestic staff, you must know that this is a human being like you, like any other person, member of the family, like your own children. And so once you are recruiting such a person, and the person has passed through all the integrity checks, and you've agreed to pick that person, the person must be treated like a member of the family. We have seen instances where domestic staff have added value to family members, like I have said earlier on. We've seen nannies whom have added value. They've taken care of children, they've taken care of the home, and have become part and parcel of the family. And it is because the family have integrated such a person like their own. Sometimes we recruit these people. We do not feed them very well. They work very long period. They eat last. They go to bed last. And they are so exhausted. They are maltreated. They are assaulted. Sometimes even the children or the family members assault them, even sexually. And you expect a return or a revenge. And that is why some of these nannies or domestic workers also vent their anger on the children. And so I am advising that if perhaps all the necessary, the needful has been done, and you've agreed to take this domestic worker, ensure that you treat the person as such. Do not look at the person as a stranger or a second-class person. So many of them do not even learn any trade. They do not put them to educational institutions. They are there at home, always working. They are so secluded. They don't have any social relationship because they are restricted in terms of movement. And so some of them becomes vulnerable to sexual assault because they are always available for whoever will assault them, will harass them. And so if we can treat our children with all the love, let us look at them as well as human beings who are also from other families who also love them. And so if such persons are delivering what is expected of them, also reciprocate. Sometimes whatever is being paid is just like a peanut. Despite the number of hours these domestic workers put in, and yet they are paid very, very little. And so they have the tendencies to steal. Sometimes they steal the meat from the pot, and then they are beaten. And so if we love ourselves, we should also love them so that they can also put in their best. Thank you.
All right. All right. Dr. Chundung Pamshah, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later on in the course of this conversation. Just to return to our guests here in the studios, we still have Professor Ogunshake as well as Pastor Boma Pepo. Professor Ogunshake, Boma Pepo raised the point, namely proper documentation of domestic or personal staff. From your experience, what category of such personal staff will be easier to document in the first instance so that we begin the formal process of recruitment and having due diligence in your background checks and so on and so forth? Will it be drivers, security guards, you're just plain house helps?
I think the responsibility to document the household help rests in the hands. I mean, you have the primary responsibility, which is to the employer, to make sure that they are documented. And when you talk about categories, everyone that is in your household needs to be documented. And the essence of this is to be able to be held accountable, not just for their own sake, but for your own sake. Because we've had instances where a house help went missing, and the person they accuse is the person who employs them. So when you look at the categories, I would say there's got to be a general, acceptance that everybody will be documented. And then you now go to the next level of categorizing them individually. For the house help, you need to make sure that you know who you're employing. We normally run through the medical check, we do drug tests, and now people are talking about credit check and even the social media check, where you get to know who are their friends. But in terms of getting them documented, this is the bit about having an identity card with their names, with their photographs, with their next of kin, and as far as even going to their villages. But a lot of Nigerians will rather employ somebody from outside the country. And again, we talk about this status symbol, where you can say, my help comes from this other foreign country. The fact remains that you're actually doing yourself a disservice because you don't know where actually they come from. Some people that doesn't speak out of French will employ somebody from a French-speaking country. So these are some of the issues we face. But as far as the drivers are concerned, you need to document them. Ask yourself a question. Does your driver have a valid driving license? Who do you talk to actually ascertain that is fully engaged to drive you? Because in most cases, you put your life in the hands of these drivers who are recommended from a friend to a friend, and you don't really know anything about them. Then your security guard, in case of accidents, in case of robbery in your homes, can they actually go to court to testify? Can they write? Can they stand up and actually deal with issues that concerns you? And these are some of the issues we need to raise. But then when we talk about the security check, this is the issue that seems to run away from all of us. These are not expensive. You need to be able to ask yourself, has this person had any previous conviction? And when we talk about criminality, does this person have this issue of stealing? Because the person who is looking for employment will not tell you that I'm a thief. And the person who brings them will not say this person is not something you can be trusted. But at the end of the day, you need to understand that this is a human being that have so many variables to his character. And once they are within your domain, once they are inside your home, they become part of you. They know more about you than you know about them. And we're not saying you shouldn't trust them, but you need to be careful of how far you go. We've had instances of people exchanging their bank password in the car while the driver is driving. Your driver is not stupid. Your driver can pick up these things. And we've had people sending their drivers to the bank. These are issues that you need to iron out because your own safety is now in your hand. And these are the issues that we seem to neglect when we are talking about documentation.
Kieran, I mean, sometimes what you just said now, you heard some people, by saying their PIN, giving their PIN, their PIN to their personal staff. As you said, perhaps it's a status symbol out of big ignorance.
It's highly risky. Now let's take this to another angle, and I want to ask Pastor this. Some people argue that there is class issue, in all of this, where most domestic, staff in families come from poor backgrounds, and sometimes when they get there, they are likely to see how they can betray their master and see how they can get out of their poor, situation. And we've also had stories, where such happens. And of course, if I start telling you what I have read in the past about this situation is so enormous. So does class issue come into this?
Well, thank you. I agree with you. I've done a lot of research and studies on these issues, so I know the storyline. The issue of class will come in at a point, but I always go back to that same identification of the three components of the individual at play. Who is a non-criminal minded person, regardless of the background he comes from. He's non-criminal minded. The next person that is criminal minded may have a peer, may not be, but have a peer group or background that is criminal minded. So when they come into your home or are working with you, the issue of class is secondary. It depends on how you relate, how the host relates with the domestic staff. If your driver is not concentrating, you should be able to say, hey, what's wrong? You're not concentrating. Try to find out if he's distracted. Sometimes the domestic assistants, I prefer to call them that helps, is that they also receive pressures from home. Mother is sick, father is sick, and then there's a bill and they are pressing on them. You're living with someone who is quite affluent, and we have this problem at home. So the person remains there and becomes very vulnerable to any suggestion of crime. Any person that comes to say, look, let's kidnap this little girl, and what does he feed? We'll give him Indomie. Oh, there's no harm. And immediately after having that discussion with you, he gives you 20,000 just for nothing. that sets you up for a crime. But if we go through these formalizations that we're talking about, and I want to add there, Prof, this is very, very simple. We can't wait to start tomorrow. We must start today, because we must integrate the entire country into this process. The trauma, like I always say, involves everybody. So the class issue, I think it's minimal. It's not the effect. The relationship is what causes these people to behave that way. I think it's more relationship related than class.
What role, sorry, Kingsley, what should be the role of security agencies, you know, to forestall occurrence? Is there any role that could play?
Yes, everybody have a role to play, but like I said earlier on, you have the primary responsibility that rests with the household. The security have the secondary responsibility. In most cases, what we have here is the job of the security services is to protect lives and properties. But we are not in a position where we have to come into your homes, because that would be intrusion. But your own you have to take the due diligence to make sure that proper checks are conducted. Then it's now left to the police, even the road safety, because a lot of these people are very important and they need to be applauded for the job they are doing to make sure that they are now engaged to say, these are the people we have employed. Just imagine somebody comes into your home and you now say, we are going to the police station to capture your data. That in itself is something that we actually, discourage them from any further criminal behavior. But there is nothing of such. And right now, presently, there are steps being taken to actually introduce those into the system where you can go and have your data captured, where we know who you are. And again, we're talking about the friends and associates, where your associates knows that the game is up. And these are the areas we need to look at. But the police are willing and ready. And when you look at the recent issues where kidnappers have been arrested and been paraded, a lot of jobs are being done. And a lot of time people tend to blame the police for this. But this is one area we cannot blame the police for, because the responsibility rests with the household. Then it's when they now bring it up to the attention of the police that the police have the responsibility to assist them. But we are ready to work with the public. The Inspector General of Police is very keen to work with the rest of the Nigerians.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Professor Ogunsekin and then Pastor Boma Pepple, in terms of what is immediately achievable, because you have said that we ought to have the database right yesterday, not even today. Yeah. What is readily achievable? Is it possible to say, okay, we begin with drivers? To say that part of the formalization of employment of a driver, you have a database to key into, and then who should be the primary, again, drivers of this kind of resource base that we're looking at?
I think that to start immediately, the hosts, we must have the private sector work together with the police, because we must create a friendly environment, that would make persons who are employing these people to go for documentation. If you have a private sector collaboration with the police, the person must not necessarily go to the police station. There's already an apprehension there. So if that happens, you could, let's say, as Abuja is, you could say, in every capital city or even in the local governments, if there is, if the police is working with maybe 3-4 private sector operators and say, look, you unify your data, but what's going to happen is, as far as Abuja is concerned, there's Gaines Village, there are social estates, start there immediately, collect data, let people register. And of course, it will be for a stipend. It won't be heavy because you're going to pay staff, you're going to deploy staff. But if this is done and you unify this whole data, if anybody is migrating, and this is very key, Prof, if somebody is migrating from one city to another city, you don't even know if it has a criminal record. All these things will pick up and they become persons of interest immediately to the police. And then you can also, if we start immediately, you could have like quarterly, the system itself will pick up issues quarterly. It will come back to you. Is this person still with you? You have to respond. If you're a host that has registered, if you register some other person in another city, the questions will come automatically to you. We are consulting and instructing, advising software developers. These things are not rocket science. They're all there. It's just for us to have the will to go that way. And I think one of the weakest things we do is like not making these things law. When we get to the point, take these things to the National Assembly and have a simple law, if it's not within the police rules, to get this collaboration so that you don't get to a point and everywhere is litigation from everybody. We must, so you start in dealing with from a point, drivers, house helps. It's simple.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now we are returning to Jos, where Dr. Pam Shah is. Madam, I would like to ask you this question because it does seem that when the issue of assault on children, comes up, it's usually the young ladies who are domestic staff that are corporates, in this, not just in Nigeria, but elsewhere across the globe. What do you make of this? Very briefly, this is going to be your final thought, in this program now.
Thank you. Not all the time, but the young girl, it's not always good and it's unlawful to engage a very young person. I think below 18. These are young persons, but we've had instances where children between 5, 9 years are employed. This is very bad. And the slightest thing such a child does, the child is at the receiving end. And like I said, these persons are the ones that are easily assaulted because they cannot run away, they have no say. But I will advise that as much as we can, if it is not very, very necessary, let us do our jobs ourselves. The issue of a security man might be very important because of the happenings. But then, if it is possible that we can do our household jobs ourselves, let us limit the number or whether or not to employ such persons. We must be careful because if you assault this child, like the other persons have said, you might be cut off with the law and it will not go well with you. So it is very important for us to do our works, especially at the weekends when we have time. If you cannot do all the jobs yourself as a family, you can send your clothes for laundry. At the weekend, you could do all the needful. But if it is very, very important that we employ them, please let us not employ very young children. It is unlawful. And let us, like I said, not abuse them, because they are humans like we are. So we must inculcate the culture and values of the family to them, and we must be very watchful for any eventuality. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much there, Dr. Pam Shah. Thank you very much, Dr. Pam Shah, for your comments. Just to read out some of the tweets that we have received from our viewers. Law Alpha C tweets, private home assistants should be persons who are well known to their employers and ought to be well remunerated to avoid frustration.
And Clifford Aguegosi says, beyond background checks, the home structure should be such that limits the house help to specific jobs to avoid what he calls home capture.
Dennis Phillip tweets, before you employ a domestic staff, ensure that you have someone who is close to him or her that has studied their character.
All right, Clifford Aguegosi again says, children and wards must be sensitized to understand vital signs of abuse and report same promptly in order to avoid breaches.
This is from Yakubu. It says, this has to be done. This is not specific here. I don't know what it refers to. Has to be done by the security apparatus, not private employers, via computer central data control and be replicated to all employers. I'm sure that's a reference to what Pastor Buma indicated in terms of documenting and then having the database of domestic staff.
And Anthony, you omitted that one. Domestic violence can only occur.
It's not clear.
Domestic violence can only occur in homes where parents have failed in their duties. Even family members are sometimes worse. I think it makes sense. And then
worse in what sense?
Well, in the sense of misdemeanor, you know. And now he also
talking about domestic violence.
Yes.
That's different from what we are discussing.
Yes.
Even that could be a subset.
Because when a domestic assistant is involved in a domestic issue, right, so it can also be a domestic violence. All right. And he says parents should look out for domestic workers that have a passion for children. That's, again, Anthony Bamidele coming there. And at this point, we have actually come to the end of this conversation. And I'd like to, first of all, thank Dr. Chundung Pamshar, sociologist from Jos. Thank you, madam, for being part of our show this morning. All right, and of course, by my right, Pastor Obama Pepple, an expert on domestic staff issues. Thank you again for being also part of our program this morning.
Thank you, Kieran.
And Professor Olu Ogunshake, technical advisor to Police Inspector General of Police. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that does it now for our discussion segments. Let's go over now to our complimentary segment, and we take sports.
Good morning, and it's nice to have you join us for sports.